hear me? A little closer?
Louder.
All right. Does this
Louder.
work? For those of you who don't know, I am a graduate of Rockland High School, so I grew up in the area. Let it be known that American liberties are not the grants of presidents or congresses, but original rights, co-equal with any inherited privileges of nobility and co-equal with government. Let it be known that many of our rights are inherent and essential, agreed on as maxims and established as preliminaries even before Congress existed. Our ancestors fled a world in which the two great powers, ecclesiastical and feudal, church and state, held the people in utter ignorance and slavery. Liberty and knowledge, indeed virtue itself, seem to have disappeared from the earth, while one dark age succeeded another, and another, and another, until God in his divine providence raised up the champions who began and brought about the Reformation. From that time forward, knowledge spread throughout Europe, but especially in England. And with it, the church and state tyrannies began to crack under the weight of the people, who, upon becoming aware of the wrong that had been perpetrated upon them, decided to rid themselves of it. This struggle against spiritual and worldly tyranny became formidable, violent, and bloody. It was this great struggle which brought our ancestors to America. It was not religion alone, as it is commonly thought, that brought them here, but a love of universal liberty and a hatred, dread, and horror of the tyrannical alliance between the spiritual and worldly powers in Europe that led to the settlement of this country. They detested the dependency and vulgar civility that was fostered by the feudal system. They knew that no such unworthy dependence took place in the ancient seats of liberty of Greece and Rome, and they also believed that all such slavish subordination of the people was inconsistent with human nature, as it was with the religious liberty with which Jesus had made them free. They knew that at all hazards, liberty must be defended, for we have a right to it, derived from our Maker. If we stand unwilling to defend it, we do it with the full and complete knowledge that our forefathers earned the liberty with which we abdicate our own. Liberty purchased for us at the expense of their ease, their estates, their pleasure, and their blood. Let us remember that it was the hope of liberty for both themselves and for us which allowed our ancestors to conquer all discouragements, dangers, and trials. They knew that liberty could never be preserved without a general knowledge among the people, who not only have a right to knowledge derived from their own human nature, but also from their Creator, who has given them the gift of reason and a desire for such knowledge. For if virtue and knowledge are diffused among the people, they will never be enslaved. This will be their great security. But in addition to this, they knew that the people have a right, an indisputable, unalienable, indefeasible, divine right to the most feared and envied sort of knowledge amongst men, namely not just of the character, but also of the conduct of their rulers. They knew that rulers are no more than trustees and agents for the people, and if that trust is violated or betrayed, the people have a right to revoke the authority that they themselves delegated in order to find more capable and better trustees. They knew that because of this, the jaws of tyranny would always be on the prowl to destroy the freedoms to think, speak, and write, and how useful it is to a tyrant and how strangely will he pervert the plain meaning of words. Let us therefore tenderly and kindly cherish the means of knowledge. Let us dare to read, think, speak, and write. Our ancestors realized that because of their conduct and the example they had set, the people of this country had been put in the position of deciding a very important question. Are societies capable of freely choosing to establish good government for themselves? Or will such things forever be determined by accident and force? And while they knew that government itself was but the greatest reflection of the flaws and inadequacies of human nature, for this reason they knew that government controlling the governed was but a mockery if government was not obligated to control itself as well. And while they knew that the primary control on government would be its dependence on the people, they also knew that experience had taught mankind that other precautions would be necessary. So with this in mind, they formed a new constitution, which ended up being the greatest single effort of national deliberation that the world had ever seen. It indeed appeared to many at the time little short of a miracle that the delegates from so many different states, each with their own different cultures, circumstances, and prejudices, should unite in forming a system of national government that was nearly invincible against legitimate objections. The establishment of a constitution in a time of profound peace and and by the voluntary consent of the whole people no less, was a prodigy as far as world history was concerned. So how did these, our illustrious ancestors and founding fathers, design this Constitution? In every way it was formed, it was a government of the people. No government in history that had ever been introduced to mankind contained so many checks and effective restraint to prevent it from degenerating into any sort of despotism. The balancing act that was achieved by the distribution of the legislative, executive, and judicial powers ended up being the best that had ever been created. For our founders knew that for any combination of these powers to exist in the same hands, whether those be of a single individual, a small group, or a large assembly even, tyranny was the inevitable result. So they went about devising a constitutional federal republic which would not destroy the states, but would on the contrary make them essential parts of the new Constitution. In pursuit of this goal, the powers delegated to the federal government were few and defined, while those left to the states were numerous and undefined. And what was the ultimate purpose they had in mind? A government which would best secure the permanent liberty and happiness of their country, our country. The providential nature of the founding of this new government was itself accompanied by numerous other blessings which were obvious to all, for they possessed at the time a chosen country with enough room for their descendants, namely us, to the 1000th generation, while recognizing that each had the equal right not just to the use of their own skills and abilities in order to reap the benefits of their own hard work, but also to the honor and confidence of their fellow citizens, not as a result of their birth, but for their actions as their fellow citizens judged them. They were enlightened by a benign religion that, while being professed and practiced in different forms, nonetheless fostered honesty, truth, temperance, gratitude, and the love of man, all while acknowledging and adoring that overruling providence, which had proven time and time again through its provision that it indeed delights in the happiness of man, not just in this life, but even more so in the next life. But there is yet one more blessing they knew would be required in order to make us a happy and prosperous people, one which Providence had provided an opportunity for, but had not guaranteed, namely a wise and frugal government, which would restrain men from harming one another, but otherwise would leave them to govern their own individual pursuits of industry and self-improvement, while not taking from the mouth of labor the bread it had earned. For they knew that if they could prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them, then they must become happy. The foundation of our national policies, both then and now, must be laid on the pure and unchangeable principles of private morality. For there is no truth which has been more proven than that there exists in the course of history and nature an unbreakable connection between virtue and happiness, between duty and improvement, and between the general principles of an honest and magnanimous public policy and the rewards of public prosperity and happiness which are sure to follow. Indeed, we must know that heaven can never smile upon a nation which disregards the eternal rules of right and wrong which heaven itself has ordained. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people and is completely inadequate to the government of any other. Because of these things, the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the very destination of the Republican model of government are rightly considered as deeply, perhaps finally, stake on the experiment which has been entrusted to the hands of the American people. Can these liberties be secure when we have removed the only firm basis for them, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are a gift from God and that they are violated but with his wrath? Indeed, it would be quite strange of us at the very beginning of all this to not in the most fervent and heartfelt way acknowledge and ask for the guidance of that almighty being who rules over the universe, who presides in the councils of nations, and whose providence can provide for every human defect. May his blessings consecrate the liberties and happiness of the people of the United States and the government which they have instituted for themselves, that it may successfully carry out the duties and functions it has been delegated. I am positive that in expressing this respect to the great author of every public and private good, that I am of one mind and of one heart with both you and our fellow citizens. The people of the United States, more than any other people on earth, are bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which reigns in the affairs of men, for it is indeed true that every step we have taken on the path to becoming an independent nation seems to have been guided by Providence itself. We owe to that kind providence the opportunity our founding fathers have to peacefully establish a constitution which will become the basis of our future national happiness. So do we now forget this powerful friend, or do we now imagine that we no longer need his assistance? Our illustrious countryman Benjamin Franklin noted that had he lived a long time,